Good morning. My name is Yasmin Ward from MISC Foundation, and I'm so excited to be here with you in this beautiful early morning in Davos. I think when we all got here, the sun was still not out, so thank you all for being here. For those who visited our pavilion yesterday, you know by now that we're bringing the momentum of generation transformation to the global stage. And what better platform for there to be intergenerational dialogue around education, a key priority for youth, than here at Davos. Today's session is all about embracing non-traditional candidates. How can we look at non-traditional candidates with a different perspective? And how can organizations create inclusive workplaces for modern workers? We're here with 5 extraordinary entrepreneurs and business leaders who are each creating unique paths for non-traditional candidates. Our panel includes John Daniel from the Network for Teaching Entrepreneurship, Omar Bawa from Goodwall. You guys can wave so they know who you are. Kevin Mills from Coursera, Kamal Dadlani from Lab4U, and Veronica from Career Harapan, Indonesia. Did I say that correctly? Amazing. So thank you all for being here this morning, and we're so excited to get this conversation going. If I can get you guys started by telling us a little bit about your organizations for the audience, and maybe we start with you, Kevin.
Sure. I'll start by just saying what an honor it is to be here with all of you today. So thank you so much to MISC for putting on this panel and for inviting Coursera to be here. So quick show of hands, actually. How many of you are familiar with Coursera and maybe even having? Okay, wonderful. So I'm speaking to an audience that largely knows about Coursera. I've been at Coursera for 8 years of our 10-year existence. And for those of you who may not be as familiar with our history, we were founded by 2 professors of computer science and AI at Stanford University who had the belief that talent is equally distributed, but opportunity is not. And they thought the pathway to kind of changing that is making education more widely available around the world. So the highest quality education could be available to anyone, anywhere. They started with a single course offered by Stanford University on artificial intelligence to then open it up online to anyone around the world. Soon had over 100,000 people enrolled in that first course. Now, fast forward 10 years, that kind of simple single course has now grown to a catalog of nearly 6,000 courses offered by nearly 300 of the world's top universities and nearly 100 of the world's top companies. And now over 110 million learners around the world are learning on the Coursera platform, earning these non-traditional credentials that we're talking about today to improve their job prospects and ultimately improve their lives. My personal role at the company right now is working with government institutions around the world who see the potential to utilize Coursera to both upskill their own public sector employees to make sure that they have the skills to carry out the important mission that our governments around the world have, but also on large-scale workforce development programs to help upskill their citizens, either in their existing university and college programs or through kind of direct-to-citizen programs targeted at unemployed or underemployed folks who are looking to get those pathways to good jobs. Thank you.
Thanks, Kevin. Veronica?
Hi, my name is Veronica Linardi. I'm a young global leader. I'm based in Singapore, but I'm an Indonesian. So right now, I serve as a CEO of my single family office, and we invest in alternative investments with a special focus on sustainability in high growth emerging markets. So through our family office, we are building one of the leading and profitable tech-enabled ecosystems in electronic vehicle, supply chain management, logistics, and commerce infrastructure. But I'm also one of the co-founders, or I am a co-founder of the largest, one of the largest human capital development companies in Indonesia. So we serve 300,000 corporates and also 11 million workers. Thank you.
Amazing. Thanks, Omar.
Thank you, Yasmin. As Kevin indicated, grateful to MISC, of course, for the invitation to speak here and be here with all of you this morning. And thank you for waking up so early to join us as well. So I'm Omar. I'm a co-founder of Goodwall. You can think of Goodwall as a LinkedIn meets TikTok. We're a skills-based social network for young talent, aged 16 to 26. We're on a mission really to level the playing field for youth everywhere and make the future of work for everyone, if I could say. The core of what we do is we help young talent really navigate their learning and earning journey. So develop their skills, showcase their skills, and then connect to opportunities, jobs, scholarships, internships based on their skills. Our community's grown to more than 2 million members in 150 countries. And again, really grateful to be here today. Thank you.
Thank you for being here, Ahmad. John?
Thank you very much, and good morning, everyone. My name is Jean-Daniel Larac, and I'm the CEO of the Network for Teaching Entrepreneurship, also known as NIFTY. We are a 35-year-old global nonprofit organization based in New York City, and our mission is to work in underserved communities in the US and around the world to teach young people how to take an idea and turn it into a business. Our alumni range from small business owners with one-person businesses to global CEOs of major corporations whom you might know, and we feel it's very important to promote the idea of inclusive capitalism, especially these days in a context of growing inequality around the world. Thank you.
Wonderful.
Kamal?
Yeah, so good morning, everyone. I'm excited to be here. I'm from Chile, so you can tell it's like 20 hours to get here or more. It was like Santiago, Madrid, Zurich, and all those stuff, but I'm excited to be here. I'm from Latin America, a growing region, and because it's a growing region with very changing dynamics, one of the challenges we have in Latin America is that public education is very underserved, and we know that the future of the workforce will be very STEM related. Some data even says 70% of the jobs in the future will be related to STEM. STEM, this is a well-known crowd, science, technology, engineering, mathematics. But the challenge is that in schools don't have labs, teachers are not prepared, the skills are not developed. So early on, students are not interested in STEM careers. So only 16% of students are pursuing, STEM-related pathways, or even having some career exploration. I could work in STEM, eventually. So that's a big challenge in the world and in Latin America. So I'm the CEO of Lab for You, where our mission is to democratize STEM learning and STEM education in schools across Latin America. And what we basically do is we design science experiments, hands-on science experiments using smartphone sensors. So we use the sensors of the phone, the camera, the microphone, the accelerometer, and we design fun and engaging science experiments so that students have fun doing science experiments and hopefully decide to pursue a STEM-related pathway, whichever that pathway is, and we'll talk about a little bit about career exploration and pathways around STEM. That's a little bit in summary.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Kamal. Thank you all for that amazing introduction. So I personally work with the skills track in MISC Foundation, and we look at skills and human capital development all the way from high school to early careers. So it's always, this discussion is very close to home for me in terms of how do we, and I personally manage the upskilling program in particular, which does not require any kind of formal education before entering our programs. So I'm always very curious on how do we get the job market to accept the candidates, and how do we get candidates to accept this as a potential pathway instead of the traditional education. So thank you for being here with me to answer some of the questions that I myself and youth have as well. So if we can start off with Ahmad, if you can tell us a little bit about, I know Goodwall is making incredible strides towards not only allowing candidates to share their skills, but also for employers to identify the skills and talents of youth. So in your opinion, why should employers take this step forward in embracing non-traditional candidates within the job market?
Thank you, Yasmin, for that question. I think maybe taking it from a macroeconomic perspective, right? Over the next decade, by 2030, there are more than 1 billion young people expected to enter the workforce, right? Of that billion, 90% are in developing countries. And when you think of the way in which employers today value and assess talent, in the more traditional sense, it's based on 3 criteria. It's based on your work experience, it's based on your education, and it's based on who you know. When it comes to work experience, typically for your average young person, catch-22, you need experience to get experience. That's number 1. Number 2, when it comes to education, particularly higher education, only a percentage benefit, only a privileged few, you could say. Right? Here in Switzerland, less than 18% go to university. Of course, we've got one of the most robust vocational training and apprenticeship programs, which we'll talk about later. But in the US, less than 40% going to college. And then globally, much lower than that. And then third, unless your parents are well connected, more often than not, you're not connected. Right? So by default, your average young person is at a disadvantage when kickstarting their career, which is why we're so bullish on skills. We really feel that skills have the potential to serve as the currency of the future of work, and which is why employers, by embracing, valuing, and assessing talent based on skills, and as a result, potential instead of pedigree, can tap into this massive opportunity and talent pool.
Amazing. Thank you for that. And I think, that leads us to our next question. I wanted to ask you, Kevin, in terms of the skills that are required, you mentioned that you guys are working with universities as well, and you have partner universities that give those courses. So how has that been in terms of the acceptance of even the university and higher education institutes to work alongside the creation of micro credentials and nano degrees for the future job market?
Yeah, I mean, I think the reason Coursera has grown in the way it has and serving 110 million learners is much to some of the issues you brought up. I mean, the existing higher education and work system wasn't serving everyone well. It was, from an individual standpoint, there was a select few who actually got to benefit from these great universities and educations, and then from a kind of global economy and company, companies were missing out on a lot of talent that kind of gone unnoticed because there wasn't such a large pipeline of people going through that traditional pathway. Also, what we tapped into is there was a desire from many of our top universities around the world to enlarge their scale of impact. The Andrew Ng, that first professor who founded Coursera, he is really dedicated to democratizing education, but when he was at Stanford, he was teaching something like 30 privileged people every semester. Maybe in a good year he taught a few hundred, but by doing something with an online scalable platform, he's now taught over 1 million learners. And so, and that's from an individual professor standpoint, but also from a institutional university standpoint. Now these universities have a chance to impact millions and millions of learners, when before that was just not even conceivable for them to do. So overall, we've seen a real acceptance of universities, really an eagerness to expand the impact in terms of number of learners served through these non-traditional pathways. And then similarly, we're seeing a real eagerness on the company side to have these micro-credentials available. In fact, we recently did a survey of employers that we work with around the world, and 92% of them really said that they would prefer a candidate who has a micro-credential or professional certificate on their resume beyond or potentially as an alternative to just the traditional kind of university degree pathway.
So that's interesting, because I find that a lot of the hiring companies may not necessarily, they can say that, but when we look at what's actually happening from the stories around us with the youth, it's more towards, if you don't have a degree, then it makes your job prospects a little smaller. But I find that organizations will invest a lot for the employees that they currently have within their company.
Yeah.
So to give them those micro credentials and those nano degrees. So it's an interesting take on things.
Yeah, and certainly there's a lot of investment to keep their own employees up to skills.
Yeah.
And all of us as individuals now have to constantly be learning to stay on the edge of our roles. The other thing is, I don't see it as a either or in micro-credentials versus degrees. We're seeing much more of a mixing and matching and hybrid. And so we now work with thousands of universities who aren't publishing courses on the Coursera platform. They're actually utilizing the courses and micro-credentials offered by other universities or other corporates to embed that into their curriculum so that as learners are completing the degree, they're also earning these internationally recognized micro-credentials. We're also seeing universities offer college credit for the micro-credentials so that perhaps, as a learner, you start with a micro-credential that helps you maybe get a slightly better job, but you still aspire to get a bachelor's degree or another degree to kind of level up. But now that micro-credential can be taken to a local university towards a degree, it actually helps kind of that building block of higher level credentials.
Okay, amazing. And we were, John, we were talking about that a little bit. How in the entrepreneurial space, some students or some entrepreneurs opt to postpone higher education rather than get right into it from the get-go. So I'd like to ask you how you are enabling the future entrepreneurs with the mindset of embracing non-traditional candidates, both in the way that they approach their work and the way that they are hiring their employees.
Yeah, well, thank you. Well, as part of our model at the Network for Teaching Entrepreneurship, we really focus a little bit on content. Obviously, if you want to start a business, you need some knowledge of communications, content, financial literacy, etc. But by and large, our curriculum model is focused on what we label as 8 domains of the entrepreneurial mindset. So collaboration, problem solving, future orientation, opportunity recognition. These are skills that we can teach young people to embrace, and they're very, very important for business and startup. As I said, our organization largely works with teenagers in the US and around the world. And our aim is to at least get them to complete a good business plan, but oftentimes they are in high school and they have a business that they start up as a result of going through our program. Well, in those cases, they are the ones who might not be quite so ready to go to post-secondary education because they want to continue building their business, and we think that's just fine. In our case, we do have a short-term credential that students can earn so that they can have some kind of formal certification that they know the basics of business and startup. But then oftentimes they will just continue to build their businesses. Some will go into higher education after 5 years. Some will go into higher education immediately and then come back to us as program alumni and say, all right, now I've got even more knowledge. I want to come back to the project, the venture that I started when I was with you. There's no one way of doing it. There are many different pathways to success. And I think one of the wonderful things about how what we are all doing these days is that it's breaking down these rigid ideas of how education and skill building should be pursued. And so, yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. And I think since you're on the mission of empowering young entrepreneurs, I will then move to Kamal, who's also on a mission to inspire STEM within the younger generation. And I would love to know why start at such an early age with STEM, and how are you preparing them at that age for the potential job market?
Yeah, why at a young age? So we want to inspire younger students, especially in high school, to pursue a STEM-related pathway. Look, I say pathway and not career-based, not necessarily a university career, but a pathway. Because what happens with many local companies that are in engineering, mining, cement, these are large corporations that are in industries, STEM industries, right? Or even the aerospace industry in Mexico, in Querétaro state in Mexico. Boeing has a factory there, and one of the challenges they have is that there aren't enough professionals to hire in the local state. So they need to go outside the state and find those skilled workforce to work in the factory, right? So we can take planes to come to Davos, right? So just, don't quote me on that. I don't know if Boeing planes are coming
You
here.
probably will be coded.
Yeah, yeah. So we have these factories in Chile and Colombia and Mexico and so on and so forth, but the skill force is not there because early on, students are not choosing pathways in STEM. So where are these large corporations going to look for that talent? So what they're actually doing in partnership with organizations like ours is training youth early on with programs. So for example, in our app, we design content. So in our physics app, for physics experiments, we have branded content, the physics of airplanes with Boeing, so that students early on can see that as a career pathway. Oh, I could be, someone who works in Boeing if I develop these skills. You mentioned these 21st century skills, critical thinking, problem solving, right? And then over the course of time, you will learn the concepts, right? But you need the skills to actually understand the difference between distance and displacement, speed and velocity, and not only learning by heart a formula, which is what happens at school today. We're not learning these skills, right? So why early on? So that students early on can see that this as a career pathway, and that's why I speak about career exploration early on, so that 16% of students that choose a career in STEM actually increases, because the need of the market will be much higher with the advent of AI and all that, and especially in industrialized regions like Latin America. So I would say if we don't start early on, it's going to be, we will need to do much more upskilling, reskilling, and we just don't have enough professionals for the needs of the STEM market in the next 25, 30, 50 years.
Amazing. And upskilling is right up Veronica's domain as well. So based on that experience within Indonesia as well, what can you tell us about the youth expectations and desire for micro-credentials and non-traditional learnings in general, such as nano degrees and technical degrees as well?
Well, I agree with what everyone has said, especially Kamal. I guess youth of today, they want immediate gratification.
Yeah.
They want to find their passion. But often not, if you have not explored enough different subjects or different coursework or different work experience, you might not have stumbled upon your experience. You need to put in the 10,000 hours in order for you to be very good at something. But many times youth get disrupted halfway because of so much distractions in the digital age.
Yes.
And many do not actually come into fruition in their search for their passion. So this is where I come to the conclusion where ikigai is very important. There's this Japanese concept of finding what you love doing, what you're good at, what the world needs, and what you get paid for. And oftentimes, you need to put in the long hours, the hard work at whatever you do to do it. And I see that whether it's nano education, whether it's micro education modules, or going to a four-year college, it's just a prerequisite of continuous learning for you to always be the best version of yourself and for you to stay relevant in this digital age, and for you to also thrive in the economy and also in company, for you to get promoted and achieve what you want.
Incredible. Thank you so much for that. So I always find myself, I'm a professional. My background is, I did HR for a very long time before I moved into project management and upskilling, but it's always been within the human capital development. And I find that I question myself sometimes. We have these discussions like this on a stage talking about embracing non-traditional candidates. And we were talking previously in the room, and I was saying, as a mother, I don't know what advice I would give my daughter if she were to come to that crossroads as do I take a higher degree or do I specialize in something? So I don't know how many of you have stopped at that crossroads, but yeah. So it's a very challenging to say yes, we embrace, and this is the direction we're going towards, but. Can you tell me your perspective on your personal perspective outside of your organizations as well, in terms of what would you do if your niece, nephew, daughter came to you with this question? Maybe Ahmad can get us started.
Sure. Thanks, Yasmin. I think on that, we should know that many of the jobs that exist today won't exist tomorrow, and many of the jobs that will exist tomorrow don't exist today, right? So while it's important to encourage, let's say, your kids or your nieces and nephews to pursue higher education and pursue skill development, they should do so knowing that they are building and strengthening transferable skills or core skills that would be valuable irrespective of whichever career they pursue. To give you a concrete example, if we take the pandemic, we had a shortage of talent in nursing, and we had a surplus in talent in hospitality. But we weren't able to transfer that talent today because the way in which we value and assess talent is based on job titles and work experience. But if we were to value it based on skills, on the more atomic level, we would have noticed that actually there's a huge shared skill set between nurses and hospitality, right? And we would have been able to transfer talent accordingly. I would see, bigger, more seismic shifts in the labor market and in the future of work in terms of the jobs that will exist. So to stay relevant, I'd recommend, continuous learning, continuous strengthening of skills and development in that sense.
That's very cool. I wonder if someone's done that mapping of like the skills across different sectors. Anyone else would like to go at that specific?
I have a 12-year-old daughter at home, so I'd say I love your question because my wife and I think about that very question all the time. And when we think about it, I do often think these days that maybe compared to how my own parents looked at my own education and how I should regard the system and opportunities, we're much more flexible in terms of in terms of how we think the pathway can unfold. One thing I often think about, though, with respect to my own child, is the necessity of helping my daughter understand all of the jobs and sectors and opportunities that are there. And I think that this is one piece of education, certainly in the US, but maybe less so in countries like Switzerland, where there is a much more well-developed vocational education sector. Mm-hmm. But so many young learners, particularly in underserved communities like the one that NIFTY serves, don't ever have a real opportunity to even understand what jobs and careers there might be. They see what's in their immediate lives. They see what's in their families. They see what's in their neighborhoods. And oftentimes they don't have much of a world outside of their neighborhoods. And so relative to your question, I think one thing that all of us have in this sector have a huge opportunity to do is to increase opportunities for young learners just to be aware of what's available. And that's why at NIFTY, we're just about to launch a new program called Exploring Careers to do exactly that. Because even though entrepreneurship, is sort of sector agnostic, we think that one way to encourage even more entrepreneurship is to give more learners a better foundation into all of the jobs and opportunities that are out there in the world.
If I may kind of go on that, because I think that's such a important point. I mean, I think that would be good advice even decades ago. Yeah. I think of having an open mind, and like as someone who grew up in a small town, I agree. Like I had no idea of like tech or engineers. I saw a dentist, a doctor, shop owner, basically. There wasn't like a wide range of jobs, and so your mindset is on that. But now the world, especially with remote work, is totally shifting. It's like a necessity to think beyond just your city, even your own country now. And I think Coursera is an example of now, the pandemic sort of forced it, but now we're permanently kind of a remote first company, meaning we hire wherever the talent is. So we started hiring in Saudi Arabia. We've started hiring in countries around the world. And I think that is something that is really important for on a national basis for countries to think, how do I upskill my citizens, because it's a global talent market. Yeah. And so instead of like trying to really wine and dine companies to like set up office, all you do is skill up your employees. They're going to hire those people. So they don't have to, like, Coursera hasn't bought a big building in Saudi Arabia, but we've started hiring people that are talented there. And that's what more and more companies are going to do. And so as a person or a citizen or a parent advising my kid, it's like, get upskilled, like have a learning mindset so that you're always learning those core skills. Get credentials or skills, something that is internationally recognizable and transferable, so you can show different employers around the world, I have these skills. So and then be open-minded to be looking at opportunities globally, outside of just your 10-mile proximity.
That's a very interesting perspective, and I would agree. It's COVID did us. That's the only favor COVID did us. So access to education, access to employment that we wouldn't have had otherwise. We were headed in that trajectory, but it was going to take us another couple of decades. Yeah.
Can I add on?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So I have a 4-year-old. Well, she'll be 4 in 2 weeks. Okay, but I start thinking about it already. Because obviously, as a parent, we want the best for them, right? So, but who knows what the world would be like in 20 years from now, right? We cannot even fathom. Or like 20 years back, what would our parents think about the jobs that we have today? There are so many new roles, like what Mr. Bawa has mentioned, right? So I agree. Just get, whether it's a 4-year degree or whether it's a 2-year vocational institute or a nano degree, whatever you can get your hands on, it's all about continuous improvement. However, having said that, I do think since I interface with a lot of employers, and in Indonesia being, a very big country with 272 million people, we interface with a lot of employers that still require a college degree for even to be a factory production worker. That is Indonesia. We're not talking about America. So that's the reality of Indonesia that we cannot dispute. There are some companies, like even my company, we're more open. For software developer, we can take somebody who's not even an engineer, as long as they have the aptitude and as long as they're willing to put the hard work. So I do think that it depends on the field of study. But as a general blanket statement, I would say, daughter, go to a good school, because you'll meet good people. You'll learn soft skills. You learn how to negotiate, how to explore and communicate your views. And then there's a lot of technical skills that you can learn from. So you learn from your peers. It's a very good environment for you to discover your passions, and you learn and you fall, right? And you discover. But if you do not get to the mechanics of a principle, if you don't go through anything step by step, you will not actually discover the beauty of anything. One more point I would like to make is that there's a survivorship bias, right? So we know Mark Zuckerberg, Bill Gates, or yesterday a gentleman called Peter Friedli that I met in the World Economic Forum. They are all non-traditional candidates, and they are wildly successful, right? But doesn't mean that the success of a subgroup means it's a successful generation of high school dropouts, right? So I feel like if you're a dropout or if you do not have the means to go to an education or 4-year education, you have so much more to prove to potential employers.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean that you will not succeed. I've seen a lot of non-traditional candidates who I really respect and in my view are so much more special than just somebody with just a paper certificate. But they need to prove themselves so much more, right? And I feel that in some fields of study, even like software engineering, like being a mechanic or an artist or the media or being an author or entrepreneur, you don't necessarily need to get certified in a formal education. But you can go to Coursera, you can go to Goodwill, you can go to so many other places to get yourself constantly relevant in the society, and you learn from doing. You autodidact. And I think that's what makes somebody a success.
Thank you for that, Veronica. And I think what John mentioned before, awareness that you need these things as well is very imperative. We have a program within the skills track in MISC that is given to high school students, and it's called Discover Your Path. It talks about all kinds of career paths that they can take, and we educate the students, the teachers, and the parents as well, so that you're getting that mass awareness for them to understand what different pathways that they can take, be it in like traditional, creative, entrepreneurial, nonprofit. So I think that's a very important aspect of what we need to do in terms of providing that holistic view, especially when we say we are now part of a global job market. And we require skills that are transferable across this global job market, which also means the competition is going to be incredibly high in this job market. So, and again, I don't know if you want to add on to this, Kamal, but again, and if this is a discussion as well that you have with the students, since you're targeting high school students, do they have that fear of if I get into the job market without, and it's becoming a very competitive one, without that higher degree, do they have that fear of not being accepted by employers? And how can we kind of bridge, change that fear or redirect it to actually empower them through skills development rather than higher education?
so adding to that, and what Veronica was also saying, change is the only constant. I like to think in parameters, right? If you think of constant velocity, no, change is the only constant. So what we always share with our high schoolers and our schools is that in this changing world, if you're able to learn, and you're able to develop these skills that will allow you to develop more skills in the future, you shouldn't fear this changing future, right? And what we see, especially in underserved communities, as you were saying, it's not a matter of the skills they have or not, because as you said also, talent is universal, but opportunities are not. It is the self-perception these students have of themselves. Oh, I won't be able to work in Boeing. It's like a big company. Oh, I won't be able to work in this large company. So there's this belief, especially in the underserved communities, that I cannot, especially with women. No, I cannot pursue a STEM pathway or STEM career. So what we have to do is change that mindset and that self-perception of themselves in a career pathway or in the job market. So if you believe you can, learn this skill and develop yourself, then maybe you'll have the opportunity to pursue a career and work in any of these companies that are desperate to get talented people like yourself. So that mindset is something that you need to change, we believe, early on, so that when they're developing these skills, they can be prepared for the job market.
And do they vocalize these kinds of fears as well?
We measure it. So we did a randomized controlled trial, schools with Lab for You and schools without Lab for You, with 4,800 high school students in Mexico. And what this RCT found is that students who run more than 3 experiments with Lab for You change their perception. There's this self-concept, or in Spanish, autoconcepto, like self-motivation, that is directly related to learning outcomes and their knowledge and their interest to pursue a STEM-related pathway. So we see it in the reports and in the research that we do. Yeah,
that's incredible. Thank you for that. I would love to hear some stories that you guys have encountered throughout, working with high school students within STEM, entrepreneurship, skills development, and it's a very broad range of specializations. And I would love to hear success stories that you've seen from non-traditional candidates. Someone personal that within this space. Who would like to go first?
I can take that, Yasmin. Thank you. Actually, just to build on what Kamal was saying earlier in terms of the importance of creating hope and creating a belief in one's ability to pursue a certain career, and also to what Kevin said earlier and Daniel as well, in terms of having let's say a broader horizon in terms of what's possible for you. Oftentimes we're limited, as you said earlier, Kevin, to aspiring to follow in the footsteps of our parents in terms of a career, or in terms of, let's say, our friends' parents or our neighbors, those in our closest circle or vicinity. Now, that's where I also see the power of community. So early on, when we started Goodwall, we were able to connect members from all around the world with each other. And there was one member who really stood out. Her name's Dana, out of Amman, Jordan. And so Dana joined the platform and then noticed that there were kids in, I believe, Nicaragua or somewhere in Latin America who were pursuing robotics. And she hadn't heard about robotics in Amman, Jordan, especially as a girl. She was, oh, wow, this is really interesting. But there were no local opportunities for her to pursue STEM education, and there were no local opportunities for her to pursue robotics. So she ended up she contacted the kids in Latin America and asked them questions, and then ended up setting up her own robotics club at school. Fast forward a year later, she ended up designing a space debris gripper that she presented at Intel ICEF, which is the largest international science fair in the world. She ended up winning NASA's special award for the space debris gripper that she designed. And then she struggled all throughout because she didn't necessarily have, getting into university was a bit of a struggle because she didn't have necessarily the right qualifications, despite winning NASA's award, designing a space debris gripper. Because of where she was from, because of her background, it was a struggle to get into university. Eventually, she got a scholarship to study aerospace. But then starting her career was also, this is fast forward a couple of years later, so we followed her whole career journey. She struggled getting a job because entering into the aerospace industry in the US, you have to be American. In Europe, you have to be European. So that limited her prospects as well. But fortunately, you know, thanks to what she was able to build, right? She broke the UK's open altitude record with a rocket she designed at university.
Wow.
She was able to, you know, secure a position in an aerospace company today. So I'm really excited about her future, but definitely a non-traditional candidate in that sense.
That's incredible. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of stories globally. One woman I recently met in Washington, D.C., his name was Kara, was a struggling, no college degree, really going from dead-end job to dead-end job, trying to raise 2 kids on what was barely a livable wage, and actually went to a Goodwill Center, which in the United States is a nonprofit that part of it does a lot of career training, and went to them, and they actually they had the discussion of what type of skills she might go, and ended up recommending that she take what's called the Google IT Support Certificate offered on Coursera. So this is about a 6-month program offered fully online that Google actually has created on Coursera to help take someone with no tech background and no college degree all the way to entry-level employable as an IT support professional. She ended up taking that program, kind of nights, weekends around the dead-end jobs that she was trying to work to barely keep her kids fed, and ended up at the end of that getting hired by one of the hiring partners, Accenture, who hired her. She's now had a wonderful career. She actually ended up, I wasn't quite sure if she was already married or got married later, but then also got her husband through the same program and into Accenture. And now she goes speaking at events, which is what I met her, about these non-traditional pathways. And Accenture actually had committed to hiring a large number of people from non-traditional pathways into their roles. And this program and these similar professional certs have been huge feeder programs into these large corporations looking for non-traditional talent like Kara.
That's incredible. Wow.
We've heard about aerospace and IT, so I'm going to give you a short story about a baker.
Oh, nice.
So about 10 or 12 years ago, a young woman named Jennifer Lee LaSala graduated from the NIFTY program. She was born and raised in a small city outside Boston called Chelsea. Immigrant community, very deprived, particularly deprived schools. Before gluten-free bakeries were a thing, she had a passion to open up a gluten-free bakery. She started in a stall in a place called Faneuil Hall, which is a big tourist attraction in Boston. It was very successful. She opened up a shop in Chelsea, opened up a second shop about 5 years later in a city called Worcester, which is a mid-sized city in Massachusetts. And then when the pandemic hit, she added an online operation. She's been honored by the U.S. Small Business Administration as a young entrepreneur to watch. She does not have a college degree. She has the certification she gained through our program, but that's all she needed to build a career and a life for herself and a fabulously successful business.
Incredible. Thank you so much for sharing that. I love that concept. Gluten-free before it was a thing, you know? Like, who would have thought of that? Thank you so much. It's been such an enriching conversation, to be honest. And I think we were talking about this before we came up here. We were saying, you know, we could have this discussion all day. You know, there's no end to it. There's no one definition of what a non-traditional candidate or a non-traditional career looks like. And I thank you all for being with me today. You know, we've discussed what that means for STEM, for entrepreneurship, for skills development, and I think the conversation is ongoing. I think this was, nano degrees. I think they came out in around 2010 and or
2013.
2013.
I was there.
You were there?
Yes, I was there, yeah.
So and I think there's the outlook of what that would mean for the future job market, the size of the global citizenship and global job markets as well will deeply impact how this looks. And I think this is one of many conversations we need to be having. And I thank you all for your time being with me today. If you have any final remarks or if we have any questions from the audience, please go ahead.
Yeah. I can say never stop learning.
Yep.
Yeah?
Yeah.
investment in yourself is the best investment.
Amazing. Any questions from the audience?
I'll ask a question. How receptive is the market to non-traditional candidates?
I was sharing in Indonesia, you need a college degree
Right.
to be a factory production worker in the big companies. So that's in Indonesia. But of course, in the smaller factories, they don't have such caliber to bring in such talent, so they would accept just anybody.
Yeah, I would say it depends on the companies. I see many companies changing. So for example, we work with a mining company in Chile, in the north of Chile, in the Antofagasta region where the desert is. You know, it's extraction of copper, lithium, etc. And they're not looking into college degrees. They're looking into the skills. They're looking into, you know, the technical skills needed in all the processes. So, and because they have lack of talent, I mean, there are not enough people willing to work in this industry, you know, young or not, that they're worried. So the companies themselves are creating programs to train, you know, women that are household workers, training them so that they can become workers in these companies. So I think it is changing. They were not doing this, you know, a couple of years ago, but now because of the need, it is changing.
Yeah.
I'd maybe just add to that, right? This is a long-term play, especially moving towards a skills-based economy. But to what, you know, Kevin said earlier, you gave the example of Accenture as a trailblazer. You could say, you know, breaking the way for other organizations to follow in terms of this. I'd also add that the market will eventually lead towards this, right? We've got a talent shortage in many ways in local markets. And if we were to, you know, again to what you said, move towards a more global, open talent pool, that's where I think valuing these non-traditional candidates and skills will become increasingly the norm and not the exception.
The only other thing, not to pile on and everything, is one, I think, as they've said, the need has gotten greater, so more companies are getting open to it. I would also say the alternative pathways are getting better. So
Yeah.
you see more of these non-traditional
Yeah.
pathways being more attuned to the needs of employers, and you see employers taking a more hands-on role in training. And so in some ways, some of these non-traditional paths are seen as more relevant than a 4-year degree that many employers say, you know, I wasn't getting the skills coming out of those programs weren't matching what I needed.
So they're becoming part of the conversation rather than just receiving.
Yeah.
That's a very good point. Thank you. All right, thank you guys so much. I would love to take you on a tour of the pavilion once we're done. And thank you, our audience, for being with us early morning.
Yeah. I think the applause is for the audience. I don't know.
Thank you.
I don't know if I would have made it that early with my jet lag. I did because I had to.